Hey everybody, Beardo here. You're watching Minutia Minute, and it's time for a very special episode of the usual Wednesday haul. But it's not just your ordinary one. It's not a run-of-the-mill, middle-of-the-road, humdrum, whatever Wednesday for me. It is a fantastic, awesome Wednesday for me. I had a great time reading my books. Even the books that were kind of lackluster, which there were a couple, there always are, were enjoyable enough, and the ones that were good were really, really good. I'm still bouncing off the walls. So I'm going to jump right into it. No humdrumming whatevering around. We're going to just get straight to it. I've got 7 books to review for you guys. The first book is one that came out probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. Don't usually review books that don't come out within a week of my usual Wednesday haul, but this one I had to make an exception because it was really, really good. I saw it when it came out, thought about getting it, didn't because it was $3.99. I was like, well, whatever, who cares? But then Oddfellows Thoughts reviewed it, and both he and the Disembodied Head did agree it was a 5 out of 5 book, and they just couldn't stop raving about it. So I had to break down and get it. It is, of course, Eternity #1, or One Shot, from National Comics, DC, National Comics, what do you call this book? it's National Comics Eternity, starring Kid Eternity by DC Comics. Yeah, that's what it is. Anyway, continuing on, despite the confusion of the title and the publisher of this book, it was a phenomenal read. Like, it is just a classic whodunit murder mystery, and in the best way. It's the kind of murder mystery that you should be able to figure out. All the pieces are right in front of you, but chances are you're not necessarily gonna guess it. You might. I wasn't totally surprised by what happened, but at the same time, I was sort of invested enough in the story that once it got to the end and you had the reveal, you're just kind of like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. And you go back and you look and you reread and you're like, wow, how is this not completely obvious, right? So anyway, fantastic read from a sort of Encyclopedia Brown enthusiast perspective, but also it's just a great sort of first issue. This is the kind of book that should be an issue 1, not a one-shot. It's a one-and-done story. You get a good sense of the character that wraps up nicely, but at the same time there are so many threads that you want to explore in this book. You've got a girlfriend who is really interesting, not a girlfriend, but a could-be girlfriend, and it's a relationship that by the end of the book, you really want to see where that relationship could head, and you want to see that character become a long-term recurring character, but I don't want to spoil it, you gotta just read the book. Also, you get to meet the Keeper, and for those of you not familiar with Kid Eternity, he conjures up ghosts to solve crimes. But when I say conjure up, he goes into purgatory, grabs them by the collar, and rips them back into reality. That's his MO, and he does it, and there's someone named the Keeper who doesn't like the way he's approaching things, and there are lots of very interesting teases as to what his powers mean on a greater scale that could be developed later on. And then finally, you just have a really great character in Kid Eternity. You have a very brief origin at the beginning that really sets up the character's powers, but it also sets up the character's motivations and why he's a cop. Complications of where those motivations could lead further on are clearly evident in this book. All in all, just a great, great read. So if you didn't pick this up, go pick it up. It's absolutely worth the $3.99. If you're someone who's looking for DC books, but don't know what to check out, this is a great jumping on point for a series, hopefully, that will not be far on this book's heels. Anyway, go buy it. Next up, the main event, the books that came out this week. I got 6 books, as usual. They're ordered from least favorite to most favorite, and it was actually pretty easy to order these. When I read them, I actually read them least favorite to most favorite, and so I sort of am anticipating the order that they're going to be in. And I will say that there was a very clear upset in this stack of books, because Saga is always the last book I read. I always assume that's going to be the best book. I try not to give it pick of the week too much because everybody's reading it, everybody knows it's good, and it's very consistent. But I always read it last because it's the one I'm most excited for. Now, I read the second to last book in my pile, and I won't say what it is now, you'll find out. And it had an ending that was just so mind-blowing and just so exciting that my mind was reeling, and it took me forever to finally calm down and concentrate on reading Saga because I was just so excited about what had happened in the book prior to reading Saga. So anyway, there's some great stuff in store. I've said this already today, so I'll stop harping about it. Let's just get into it. First up, I have Green Lantern number 12, which is easily the most disappointing book this week. My prediction for this book was that Sinestro was going to be killed by Black Hand. Now, that seems like an extreme, like, you know, they probably wouldn't do that, and they didn't. But I thought it was going to happen because, you know, Hal's kind of got his own ring going on. It's not really connected to the network necessarily. It may not work the way everyone else's rings work, whereas Sinestro has an actual Green Lantern ring. And according to issue 0, we're going to have this new Green Lantern coming in. So my assumption was, okay, Sinestro's going to die, and his ring is going to go to this new Green Lantern. Not what happens at all. And the direction they went, well, when you're reading the book, it isn't a surprise just because of the way they delivered it. It could have been a great twist, but they just killed it in the way they set it up. And I think you'll know what I mean when you read it. I don't want to spoil it, but basically, Black Hand is reading out of the Black Book, and it says something, you know, it starts a sentence, and at the end you find out the rest of the sentence, and the sentence is, you know, the big reveal. But when you read the first half of the sentence, you pretty much know what the second half is going to be, you know? So, I don't know. It was a strange choice on the part of Jeff Johns on that in that respect. But nevertheless, there were some interesting things that happened in this. I'm a sucker for Black Hand, so these books have been a little bit more enjoyable with Black Hand in them than they have been for other people. But this issue basically for Green Lantern was just a lot of fighting of zombies, not really much to say, with kind of a twist at the end that's going to lead into the annual. Now the annual I am very excited for, and I think maybe, we'll see, Sinestro might die. I'm putting my money down now. Anyway, the other big portion of this book is devoted to the Guardians, and that was pretty interesting. But it made me really think about how I would have done this story arc, because the the Guardians start thinking like, well, we've got all these different corps now. We've got to get rid of, you know, the Red Lanterns and the Indigo Tribe and blah blah blah. We got to get rid of all these guys, not just the Green Lanterns. And so my thought was, well, it would have been great to have like 2 years of, you know, Lantern's Civil War, in which, you know, after the Lancers have gotten together and done this great thing defeating, you know, ending Blackest Night, basically, they all turn on each other because the Guardians are trying to get control back of the galaxy, and so they start taking out the other Lanterns one at a time, and using the Green Lanterns as a tool for that. And at the very end, when the Green Lanterns win the day, they turn on the Lanterns too. Like, that would have been awesome. I think that would have been a great story arc. Instead, we basically get the Guardians plotting, and then they're like, well, we got all these guys to get rid of too. Well, we better get started on that. And there's this element of like, I was a little lost in this book when I was reading it, like, and I've been reading this book since 2006, and yet somehow there were all these sort of story threads coming up, kind of almost out of nowhere, and it's like they were always present, but they were just kind of ignored until now. And so when you're reading it, there's just a lot of like, what the heck moments, you know? Did I mention there were some lackluster books? This was one of them. But anyway, I'm just disappointed we didn't have this, my idea. Why didn't they do my idea? That would have been so much more interesting. I think part of the problem is the Green Lantern franchise is a little bit too big for its own good. I think that Jeff Johns, part of the reason why this book is so lackluster is it has to fit into the continuity of not just Green Lantern Corps, but also Red Lanterns and New Guardians. And I think having that much continuity going on at once really hinders the kinds of stories you can tell. Maybe Jeff Johns would have, you know, done some kind of great epic, you know, Guardians sending the Green Lanterns to kill off every single member of the other corps and then turning on them if the other corps didn't have their own books. You know what I mean? So I think that maybe that's part of what Green Lantern is suffering from right now, is just getting too big, too fast, and having too many books in too short a period of time. Which is disappointing, because, you know, you want Green Lantern to be a big franchise, because it's one of those, it's the little engine that could, you know, it's always had its nice little niche, and then all of a sudden it just exploded, and, you know, you just want to see it do well. One thing that I will say absolutely pissed me off about this book, and this is sort of on a separate topic here now, but the one thing that made this book easily my bottom pick had nothing to do with the stuff I've just whined about. It was one very specific thing, and it's when the Guardians are plotting, they're saying, well, we have to get rid of certain people. And the people they need to get rid of in order for their plan to work is Hal Jordan, who they've already gotten rid of, or at least they think. Oh crap, I'm blanking on names. Kyle Rayner, Guy Gardner, and I forgot the other. Oh my gosh, what's his name? Well, you know who he is. And I don't want to just say the black guy because that makes me sound so terrible. But, oh, Jon Stewart. There we go. Oh my gosh. Crisis over. Anyway. And Jon Stewart. So basically all of the Earth Green Lanterns they're worried about getting rid of. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, what about the Green Lantern Corps? Like, what about Kilowog and Tom Marie and, like, all of the other Green Lanterns that would pose a threat to their plan? I was kind of offended by, like, the narrow-mindedness of Jeff Johns basically saying, well, the only people who could possibly challenge the Guardians and their plotting are the Earth Green Lanterns? Like, you know, that takes this huge universe he's single-handedly created. I said in my last review, like, you gotta give him credit for building this universe back up. And he takes that universe and just shrinks it right back down by, you know, basically making the Guardians only worry about the Earth Green Lanterns. I was just really disappointed by that. But anyway, I did kind of enjoy the book because I do like the Black Hand, and it was a decent enough lead into the annual, but again, as Ghost Critic and many other people have pointed out on multiple occasions, not much happened in this book. Alright, anyway, enough about Green Lantern, on to the next thing. Next up is a book that has been all over the charts for me. It's been... Last issue I thought was pretty solid. It wasn't great, but it was definitely an issue where I felt like I had seen a lot of improvement, and then there are other times when it's just a stinker. This time around, it was decent, but again, it wasn't great, and it was Amazing Spider-Man. This is issue 691, and what can I say? We'll get the obvious thing out of the way first. As usual, I felt like the artwork in this book was horrible. Like, I don't like his artwork. I just can't get into it. And it's passable, but it's just not good. And, you know, it's neither good nor terrible. Like, at least if Rob Liefeld was doing this book, I would have something to really rant about. But Cameron Coley, I think that's how you say his name, his artwork is just so blah that it's just really not exciting to look at, either, you know, in a negative way or in a positive way. So that's almost worse than having Rob Liefeld in this book in some ways. I was trying to think of things that, like, would make this artwork better, and I think there's really two big things. They gotta lay off on the inking on this. I feel like this book is way over-inked. They need to lighten up a bit. And then I was looking at the front, and I saw that Klaus Janson does the ink, and it's kind of like, oh, that explains so much. Because, I mean, Klaus Janson's style is very ink-heavy, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It works really well for someone like Frank Miller, but I feel like Cameron Coley, it's not working for Cameron Coley. I feel like someone with a lighter hand might do better. And then the other problem is, especially with this book, like, there was a lot of digital effects and, you know, like, blurred motion and all that stuff, and I feel like this person's artwork, like, if you just kind of boiled it down a little bit, lightened up on the ink, it might have kind of a nice kind of Chris Samney element to it, or something like that, you know, something more in that vein. Instead, it's kind of neither, like, fancy illustration artwork, and it's not sort of indie stylized artwork. It's just somewhere in limbo between those. But enough about the artwork, let's talk about the story. So, again, there's two big things going on in this book. You got what's going on with the Lizard, and you got what's going on with Spidey. Now, the Lizard stuff was pretty interesting, although I was a little bit confused, because at the beginning of all this, you start off with, well, there's a good Connors trapped underneath this evil lizard persona and the lizard being. And then he turned into a man, and then it was basically, well, no, he really is a lizard at heart, and so it's a lizard trapped in a man's body. And then you get this revelation in this, I'm going to use that, that's a new word. You get a revelation. It's a revelation and a realization that basically Connors himself is basically crazy. Like, he could not be the Lizard and he'd still be insane. And he still would have tried to kill Peter Parker for various reasons. And so then it's like you've got, you know, an insane person in an insane body, or whatever. And then at the end of this, though, you end up with him basically being cured with this anti-mutant whatever kind of deal. And he basically gets speared with it. And the idea is it's going to turn him from a lizard into human form. It doesn't do that, but it cures his insanity. And that made zero sense for me. But nevertheless, there is kind of an irony, and I enjoy the irony at the end of the book when you sort of have the lizard, who's just this ordinary person, but can't show it because everyone just sees this crazy, evil, lizardness. Let's see, what's going on with Spidey in this book? So, Spidey wasn't very interesting in this book for me. Like, they tried to set up him having to make a choice, where Madame Web went to him and said, like, you gotta go back to Horizon Labs because something's gonna go down that's gonna affect the future. You gotta forget about this immediate threat and go to something, that's gonna have a greater impact later. Spider-Man ignores this and continues with the path that he's on. And so at the end of this book, we kind of get the fallout of that, and we learn a little bit more about that. And the problem for me was, it's just sort of a instant gratification kind of a choice. And, he makes the stupid choice, clearly, but at the same time, like, there's not much of an emotional investment. It's literally just like, well, I'm concentrating on this right now, leave me alone. And then, of course, like, something else goes wrong. You know what I mean? It's not... I wish there was more of an emotional connection with the reason why Spider-Man made that choice, so it would be a little bit more poignant, and I feel like if they had played that up a lot more, that the conclusion of this story arc would have been a little bit less lackluster. But as it is, it's just kind of like, well, that happened. We'll see what happens next, you know what I mean? So that was just generally disappointing for me, I guess. However, I am interested to see what's coming next. The tease at the end was very intriguing, although I'm a little bit confused because I'm not up on Spider-Man. My big hope with Spider-Man going forward is that, every time he's around these freak shows, the Lizard or the vampire Morbius, he treats them as less than human. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I don't have time for you because you're a crazy villain and I don't have time for crazy villains right now. And he kind of comes off like a xenophobe or something like that. Obviously, xenophobes don't necessarily include mutants, but we'll call it that. And it just makes him seem like a real prick. And it's not just that he's like tortured, he seems like an asshole. So hopefully that goes away. I'm really not liking that either. What did I like? Let's focus on the positive, because I did actually mostly get a kick out of this book for the most part. It's kind of like the first 2/3 were kind of terrible, and then the last third was interesting because I did like what the big reveal was, like what happened at Horizon Labs that Spider-Man missed out on that he should have been there for. You get to find out about that, and that was really intriguing. And then you also do get a good moment with the Lizard at the end and sort of learning a little bit more about his character that made him a bit more poignant. So now it's just making Spider-Man a little bit more poignant again. So anyway, hopefully next issue, we got a new arc starting. Hopefully it's a little bit more fun for people. And I am excited to be on this book still, even though it hasn't been great. I'm excited for it to pick up. Alright, and those were the only two that were really lackluster. Everything else was pretty much smooth sailing, and there was some very smooth sailing to be had indeed. So, we will kick off the better books with Batwoman number 12. And To Drown the World, I think, was the title of the last story arc, and thank God it's finally over. I've been feeling so fatigued with Batwoman because we've got this same story of these kids disappearing. And even though we're still on that story here, this story arc has the benefit of having none other than the great J.H. Williams III back on artwork. And it's such a treat. Like, you forget how good it is. And this is very good. What can I say? Like, you know how beautiful this book is. I shouldn't even get into that. Just trust me, it's amazing. What I will say about this book is that it definitely is striking a new tone. So even though we're still on that same trudging story arc, it's going to take a little bit different of a direction and a little bit different of a tone. One thing that's important to note about the artwork in this is that usually when J.H. Williams III does his art, he has the painted art and he has sort of the more regular comic book art. And, Kate Kane has the comic book and then Batwoman has the painted art. In this, it's all painted, even the Kate Kane stuff. And there's definitely a driving force behind this book to make it a little bit more of a superhero book, in the sense of, like, we're really going to focus on Batwoman for this. And we're going to really see Batwoman on an adventure. And there's a lot of great moments along the way that really are just set up. Like, not a ton actually happens in this, but we get none other than a team up with, as you can see at the bottom here, Wonder Woman, which doesn't come till towards the end of the issue, but it clearly is going to be, you know, turn into, in the next issue, a female superhero tour de force, and I'm really excited to see what that's going to be like. Like, it's going to definitely, I feel like it's going to be a play on sort of the Batman-Superman team-up, except it's going to be Batwoman and Wonder Woman, and I think that's going to be a real treat to watch. So I'm looking forward to the next issue of this, and in the meantime, even though the story was a little bit lacking in this, it's just an art book, you know what I mean? You go through it and you just let the artwork wash over you. The way he illustrates Wonder Woman in this and some of the things she fights is absolutely unparalleled, and like, I love Cliff Chiang's artwork on Wonder Woman and the designs of the characters that he has on Wonder Woman. I've talked about it plenty of times, but there's some great Wonder Woman character designs in this too that really give Cliff Chiang a run for his money. So anyway, it was really enjoyable. My favorite part of this issue has to be seeing Mr. Bones, and when you see it, I think you'll get a chuckle out of it. I won't spoil it. Just go read it, find out about Mr. Bones, my personal favorite moment of the issue, and then just enjoy looking at the pictures, because it's a pretty comic book. Alright, next up, we have a book that was a bit down for me last month. I've since reread it, or reread last month's issue, and I felt quite a bit better about it. However, I stand behind my stance in that it was a bit disappointing. I just felt like with Daredevil number 16, the whole thing with Hank Pym was just a little bit derivative. It just wasn't enough to invest me in that story, and plus you had really gotten a strong climax at the end of issue 15, and so to continue for an entire issue with just the denouement of that story felt like just not the smartest move. But you know, I've been criticized for my opinion on that, and rightfully so, in that maybe I'm looking at it, you know, as Agent 42Q said, a little bit with too much of a literary lens. But at the same time, I mean, I think that's fair. You know, I'm gonna go for it, and I stand behind my statement on that. However, issue 17 really picks things up in a very satisfying way, and if you're looking for the next scene at the end of issue 16, you're not going to get it. This is very much like issue 14 or whatever it was, where you have the flashback to an early story of when Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson were in school together. Right in the midst of all this, you know, Omega Drive stuff going on, you have this whole flashback issue. And that issue was a real treat. And this one, it's kind of the same thing. You get a really nice, poignant story that that just really fits the overall arc of what's going on, but at the same time really stands on its own. So in this particular book, let's see here, and I should probably hold it up. I've been sitting here talking about it without holding it up. Basically, you have a story where Foggy Nelson is keeping something from Daredevil, and this is back, or from Matt Murdock, and this is back before Foggy even knows who Daredevil is. And so you get this great sort of role reversal, but then there's this great twist at the end where it's like the reason why he was withholding it from Matt is very touching, and becomes a very touching moment for Matt at the end. And so it's definitely one of those emotional roller coaster of an issues, especially towards the end. But the place where this book really shines is with the big fight that takes up most of the middle of the story. Basically, you have Daredevil fighting a guy, I think he's called Stiltman, and he's basically a robot that has really long legs. And so he can like shoot his legs up to, you know, the 23rd story of a building and attack people. And the artwork is just so reflects that idea so well. Like, Mark Waid had this great idea to, you know, have this kind of quirky villain and have a sort of a quirky fight with him, but then you have none other than Mike Allred on art, and he takes that and just runs with it and brings it to the next level. There's some very great kinetic, followable action in this. It's not just sort of a lot of splash pages of action. Like, it's very sequential, and you can really follow it, and it tells a very clear, action-packed, well-paced story. And that's where this book really shines, and that's where Daredevil always shines, which is that, you know, this book really uses the medium of a comic book to its fullest, and this issue just absolutely no exception. So anyway, even though I harped on Daredevil number 16, it would have been, It's always a good book, and this book just totally redeemed whatever complaints I had about it before. So go check it out. All right, we're on to the penultimate issue, and you probably have guessed that that's going to be Saga. Now, Saga number 6, also a blast to read. As I said, it took me a little while to get my head around it just because I was so excited about the other book that I had read. However, once I got into this book, like, it really is a satisfying conclusion to the first arc. We've got, issue 6, the trade's coming out, and they really wrap things up really, really nicely with this. Sorry, changing my notes around here. They finally reach Rocket Ship Forest, and seeing the rocket ship was pretty cool. I really liked sort of the direction the rocket ship turned, or the direction, the idea, the way that idea, whatever. I liked the idea of the rocket ship and the way it sort of played out. And it really, the rocket ship in a lot of ways is kind of a good representation of what this story is like and why it's good, because it's like equal parts fantasy, equal parts science fiction. So you have this rocket ship that's a rocket ship, and it's, a science fiction craft, but at the same time it's made out of a tree, and it's made out of wood, and it's this very earthy place to live. And that was just a really great, twist on a classic idea that I really enjoyed. Also going on in this book, you have the Will continuing his story. Obviously, he was left hanging at the end of the last issue when his certain bounty hunter friend died. If you haven't read it, I won't spoil who it was, but you can probably guess. And so he's still on the phone, and he ends up having a nice little conversation with Prince Robot in which he decides, you know what, I'm coming for you. So again, I'm really excited to see the point when the Will and Marco and company meet up and they all get to, team up and have, their big moment. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But for right now, we're going to spend some time on this rocket ship. And the rocket ship has some uninvited guests that at the end is not really a twist ending. Well, it's kind of a twist ending, but it's more of like, aha, we've expanded our family of characters. And I'm saying that in a way that hopefully won't spoil it, but at the same time, maybe I just spoiled something. We'll see. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much about Saga. It was a great conclusion. It's always fantastic, so go pick it up. Alright, on to the main event, the book that absolutely blew me away this month. Absolutely a fantastic book from start to finish. A book that has been at the top in the past, has kind of been it's still been good, but it hasn't been like absolutely stellar for the last couple of issues, and this book just so came out of left field for me in terms of hitting it out of the park. I can just show you, I can't even say the words out loud. So, for those of you who aren't familiar, here's the story so far. And I'm going to spoil the hell out of this, so if you haven't read it, stop my review, come back, watch this later, because this is a book you don't want to have spoiled, and I am going to spoil it. So basically, the story so far, what you need to know about Wonder Woman is she is helping someone who is pregnant with Zeus's child, and all of the gods are after Zeus's child. And it basically boils down to Apollo, who's trying to usurp the throne, and Hera, who's trying to kill the baby and has her own agenda. And they all meet on Mount Olympus, and we're going to have the big final battle, and that's where issue 11 leaves off. Issue 12 picks up right where it left off, not surprisingly, and we get to see what everybody would do to Zola and her child, basically. And there's some really great, like, again, this book is about mythology. It's not a Wonder Woman book, but it's a Greek gods book, and this book really exemplifies that in some great ways. Hera, basically, her solution to the whole problem is to throw Zola off of Mount Olympus, which is a never-ending mountain, basically. And so basically what she tells Zola is like, well, I'm going to throw you over a mountain, and you're going to have your baby, and it's going to be bouncing off the rocks, attached to your umbilical cord while you fall for eternity. Now that is harsh. And at the same time, though, like, as much as that's like really gross and harsh, at the same time it fits sort of like a Greek god's punishment. Like if you think about like Sisyphus, who has to, push a boulder up a hill for eternity, or you think of, oh shoot, what is it, Man, I'm having Prometheus. I'm having a terrible time with names today. Prometheus, I believe it was, who, you know, is basically condemned to have his intestines eaten out by crows for eternity and have it regrow and eaten out every day. You know, you have this image of Zola basically in that kind of a conundrum, and it just, you know, again, that's not already a Greek myth, but it totally fits the mythology of the Greeks, and it fits this version of Wonder Woman very well. So anyway, really enjoyed that. Obviously, Wonder Woman has some things to say about that, and she ultimately stops that from happening. And then you kind of get Apollo's approach to things, and he has one agenda, and one agenda alone, and it's to stop this prophecy from coming true, which is that basically Mount Olympus will be torn asunder, like we'll just word it like that. And so his solution to that is to become king himself. Conveniently enough, power hungry are we? And he's also inclined to kill this baby, but Wonder Woman basically cuts deal with him and says, you know, I don't care what you do, but you have to let me take Zola and the baby, and we'll live our lives. And basically the deal she has to make with him is, well, if this baby somehow later on down the road becomes a threat, Wonder Woman will have to kill the baby herself. Very curious to see when that's going to come, because I'm sure that moment will come someday. Anyway, so that's kind of where things are left. However, there's one mystery player who has his own ideas of what to do with the baby, and that's where the first big spoiler comes, and that's where the big, you know, the first big twist of this issue is, and that's Hermes. So Hermes has been the messenger. He's been the helpful guy that's sort of been on Wonder Woman and Zola's side from issue 1. Like, I think we see him before we even see Wonder Woman. And at the end of the issue, he comes and steals the baby, leaving without a trace. He takes the baby to Demeter, who is an interesting choice. I'm not going to say that this is necessarily a bad place for the baby to be raised, but it's definitely not what you expect, and Wonder Woman is not pleased with this particular outcome. Obviously, Zola's left alone without her baby. She's equally upset, and it's going to be really, really interesting to see where that story goes. Big twist that really got me excited to continue reading the series, and it was also a very satisfying ending to the story. However, that's not the ending of this book. There is one more spoiler, one more absolutely monumental thing that happened at the end of this title that pushed this book over the top and into pick of the week, pick of the month, pick of the year. I mean, seriously, I haven't been this surprised by a book since the New 52 happened. Like, I can honestly say that. And it's not, you know, obviously you had Batman number 10, which was totally out of left field, but that's the problem. It was out of left field. You know, you're reading it and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that was a fun idea, and it was definitely surprising, but it was completely out of nowhere. This is not out of nowhere, but I never saw it coming, and I never imagined in a million years that it was about to happen. And when it did, it was just, it brought up so much excitement for something that I love and hold very dearly to my heart. And so without further ado, here's the end of the book. So, last chance, this is the big one. So if you're gonna read this, you had better not watch this. Don't blame me, you've been warned. Okay, so at the end, Hermes takes the baby to Demeter, and I gotta read this so I get this right. Okay, so the baby's crying, and Hermes goes, crying, eh? And Demeter's like, I'm sorry, Hermes continues, I think it may be a bit early for the baby to be crying, meaning that the baby's gonna have plenty of reasons to cry later. And Demeter goes, a baby can't help but do that, thief, because implying that he stole the baby, which he did. And then Hermes goes, this child, Demeter, it will have plenty to cry about later. I just said that. Anyway, and then you cut to this wasteland, this Arctic wasteland, and a hand is coming out, and in the dialogue boxes it says betrayal, death, perhaps the fall of Olympus, or depending on how you look at it, a beginning, new gods. And this, I'm getting chills just saying that out loud. And at the end you get this panel right there, and you see a certain helmet, and Orion's here. I'm literally like, is my face turning red because like I'm dizzy with excitement right now? Like, what a way, what a direction to both take this book, but also and to reintroduce new gods. But most important of all, like, you know, if this is the treatment that they've been giving the Greek gods, and that they're, you know, delivering us to the new gods in the same way, how good is that going to be? Like, the thing about New Gods is, you know, as great as those early Kirby books are, and the diehard fans will collect every single issue of New Gods that there ever was, there's not a lot of great New Gods stuff out there. This could be the best. This is me, by the way, this is me postulating on the future here, but seriously, like, this could easily be the best New Gods since Kirby. This is going to be absolutely amazing. If it's anything close to the quality that Brian Azzarello has delivered to Wonder Woman, I am absolutely ecstatic. And I don't know if the New Gods are going to be delivered to us in Wonder Woman, if they're going to get their own series. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is that my heart is racing. I am absolutely stoked. So anyway, those are the books I got, guys. I had a fantastic day of reading. As you can tell, Wonder Woman really took the cake, but there was lots of other great stuff too. We've got Saga, issue number 6, great read. Daredevil, issue number 17, great read. Batwoman, issue number 12, beautiful read. Amazing Spider-Man, 691. It's okay. And Green Lantern number 12. It's okay. And then, of course, finally, Eternity, one-shot. Fantastic. This would have been a contender for Pick of the Week, too, if this had come out this week. So anyway, great haul, great reads. Hope you guys are having a great time reading your books. I'm going to let you go now. This is Beardo signing off. I'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.